Good evening. This is group number 5. So members Gianna Humphrey, Aaliyah Miller, Koan Pulliam, and myself, Caitlin Long. And we are talking about Chapter 8, which is Personal Communication as Assessment. And so this chapter has 5 objectives. The first one is understand issues to consider when assessing via personal communication. The second objective is use questioning strategies to gather diagnostic information to deepen students' content understanding and reasoning proficiencies. Objective number 3 is structure class discussions for formative and summative use. Objective 4 is conduct conferences, interviews, and oral examinations to obtain accurate information about student achievement. And objective 5 is use student journals and logs as formative assessments. And so um, the main points of this chapter were basically kind of talking about how personal interactions and communication we sometimes don't view as assessment, but that we actually can gain a lot of information and knowledge about student achievement and understanding through personal communication, as long as we know kind of the areas where we need to plan to make sure that we can eliminate bias and make it subjective or make it objective as much as possible and avoid being subjective. And so the different types of personal communication can be used for different targets, like we talked about for all the other types. So that is kind of the introduction.
Oh, I have objective number 1, which of course is understand issues to consider when assessing via personal communication. In chapter 8, one major objective is understanding the key issues involved when using personal communication as an assessment tool. This includes recognizing that assessment through questioning, discussions, and conversations is highly subjective and requires intentional planning. Teachers must ensure clarity in learning targets, maintain fairness, and be aware of potential biases or personal filters that can impact interpretation of student responses. Additionally, creating a safe learning environment is critical so that students can feel comfortable sharing their thinking honestly. According to the chapter, reliability and validity um, depends on careful questioning, cultural awareness, and accurate record keeping to avoid misjudging student understanding. I also have objective 2, which is use questioning strategies to gather diagnostic information and deepen student understanding. Another key objective is the use of effective questioning strategies to both assess and enhance student learning. Chapter 8 emphasizes that well designed questions can reveal gaps in knowledge and uncover student reasoning processes. Teachers are encouraged to use both knowledge level and reasoning level questions, allowing students to think aloud and explain their thinking. This approach not only helps diagnose misunderstandings, but also promotes deeper learning and critical thinking. The chapter also highlights the importance of think time, where teachers pause after asking questions to allow students to process and respond thoughtfully, leading to more meaningful engagement and higher quality responses.
So I had a learning target 3, structure class discussion for formative and summative use. So when students participate in class discussion, what they say reveals a lot about their level of understanding, knowledge, and reasoning abilities. During these discussions, teachers listen to and evaluate the quality of student contributions and infer student or group achievement. Class discussions are recommended for formative assessment for learning to diagnose problems and deepen knowledge, understanding, and reasoning. This helps as teachers figure out where students are at in their learning and allowing us to readjust as needed. And for me, as someone who teaches in pre-K, I found myself using class discussion and small group discussion multiple times a day, every day, and it works best for I know for my class. It probably works best for some of your classes too. So also in this section discusses that when discussions are used as an assessment, we should have prepared our questions or discussion topics, and students should be aware of what we are evaluating and how we are evaluating them. For instance, if we are evaluating them for their understanding or their ability to participate, they need to know which one or both. We also learn about how some discussions, give me 1 second. Okay, we also learn about how some discussions can be risky for some students because they may be shy or not like to speak up in front of others. So when this happens, it's important to let them feel comfortable and know that it is a welcoming and safe environment and that they are able to speak up whenever they need to. And so overall, class discussions are a great way for teachers to evaluate students' understanding and learning when structured the correct way.
Yeah, I think that for both of those things, like the rubric that they had in here, I thought was really handy for like doing a seminar or discussion because I felt like sometimes for class discussions, like unless you say like you have to all speak 2 times or whatever. And I had a teacher once who gave us all 2 pennies and we had to speak 2 times. So once you put one of your cents, you had 2 cents to put in to throw in. So you put one in when you said one comment, and then you put the next one in when you said your next comment. And until everyone was out of their 2 cents, no one like if you were out, you couldn't speak again. And I thought that was like kind of a handy like tool so that the same people don't speak all the time and for people who it's not super comfortable for, like having it like I only have to speak 2 times and it's a visual representation of like, okay, I've got my one done, I've got my two done, like I'm good now. So I thought that was like some like a kind of creative way to like structure that.
Yeah, that seems very
It's
unique
good.
and different. I haven't heard of the penny one before.
Yeah. And I guess for record keeping, like then the teacher knows who doesn't have their pennies in front of them so they can know like, okay, they've spoken. So I guess that would also I didn't think about that, but help you keep records too.
That's a good idea.
So objective number 4 is conduct conferences, interviews, and oral examinations to obtain accurate information about student achievement. So with interviews and conferences, teachers meet with students individually. This is the time for both to talk and discuss openly about any specific needs or any other achievement related topics. There are a few ways to conduct a successful conference and interview. So, number one, think about your questions in advance. Number two, avoid questions that result in a simple yes or no. Number three, have samples of students' work. Number four, conclude each meeting with a summary. These meetings have huge impact on your student-teacher relationships. So, with oral examinations, students respond orally to exercises that you have given them. To successfully create those exercises, you want to ask questions with very easy vocabulary and present one set of questions to every student, not offering choices of questions to not offering choices of questions to answer. You may also want to have a recording result as an example.
Yeah, I think that's good too. I use like mini I call them my mini conferences a lot in class, which I'm not necessarily looking for like reasoning targets or things like that, but I am looking for like more like have they done the things I need them to do? So it's like kind of the like product assessments, we talked about before, but with like a oral piece too. And like then I'm able to have a conversation with them if they haven't done it about what they're struggling with or what they need help with. So I like to use conferences um, in my class. Okay, I had objective 5, which was use student journals and logs as formative assessments. And so um, there's a different two different types of journals it talked about, but the purpose of both journals and logs is to like engage in conversation with students, not in a oral way, but in a written way, but in a casual, like low stakes kind of environment. And so There's two different types. One is the dialogue journals, and those kind of I've never really used that as a student or as a teacher, but like capture conversations between students and teachers. And so like my understanding of it is like as you are teaching, so maybe you're lecturing or going over something, students write like messages to you and like I guess comments back and forth. So as you're like asking questions, like they're responding in their journal, in their dialogue journal. Um, but it can also like help you know if they have met those achievement marks, help them self-assess as well. Um, write down if they have points of confusion, or any like particular insight or connections from what you're talking about to another subject or another idea you've mentioned. And so then the teacher would read the messages and then respond back to them in their journals. So basically, like evaluating what they said, making sure that they understand the key points, giving them comments and feedback that way. So I thought that was kind of cool. I've never really done that or experienced that as a student either. The one I have experienced more as a personal journal. Um, our English teacher always called it a day book because we wrote in it daily. And so those are like less structured responses. She would normally give us like a prompt for the day, and sometimes it was related to what we were talking about as far as like if we were reading like Romeo and Juliet, for example, or Uglies, we would write about something related to the literature we were reading. But sometimes it was like simple as like talk about your favorite fast food or um, like something current event-y, so like Super Bowl commercial, like which one was most impactful for you or things like that. And so it was a way to get us just like like quickly writing and kind of trying to get our thoughts out succinctly. Um, but she was really good about it says make sure you establish a clear purpose and the audience. So our audience was her and I guess ourselves. It wasn't something that was shared with the class. Um, and we did get a grade for it, so it was kind of more of like a participation grade, but it was like you had to have your responses, and it had to be a full paragraph, handwritten, and all of those things. So I think that that's kind of a more common type of journal. Um, and then the learning logs are written responses that kind of keep track of it had a bunch of different options. So achievement targets they've mastered, targets that they found useful or important, targets they're having difficulty mastering, learning experiences, lessons, or strategies that worked particularly well for a student, and their thoughts about why they worked, which I thought that was really important, why they think that it worked for them. Experiences, lessons, or strategies that were confusing or difficult, with an explanation of what the problem is on from their perspective, and then questions they have thought about that they need help with, or ideas for study topics that they want to try in the future. Um, and so I thought that was really interesting. I also have not used a learning log in my class, but I do think that there's benefit in doing that because it helps them like keep track of their learning, their questions, and also has them reflect on what they do best. So, what note taking strategies that work best, or what study strategies that they like best. And so, I thought that was a really good way to keep track of that.
I think that's really good. I've never done a learning log before, but in hearing some of the stuff that you were saying about like the journals and the discussion prompts, I do that, and I also have them create I call it an exit reflection. So once you get done with like everything, like I want to know like what your thoughts are and where you are at as far as your understanding is concerned, um, and gaining knowledge about the current content area that we're teaching on or working on. So I feel like that was really good.
Yeah, I think that teachers who do exit tickets, which those are things that like I want to get better about doing instead of just being like, okay, y'all are good. But I think that that does help. It does help as a teacher to know what they're thinking, but then it does like kind of keep them accountable as well and keeps them like
Mhm.
okay, like I'm gonna have to prove that I know something by the time I walk out this door. So I need to like be
Mhm.
on task and like focused and like engaged with that. So I think that's really good.
So I had reflection question number one, which is which ideas in this chapter do you find most convincing or useful and why? So I found the topic of using learning logs the most useful because it allows for the teacher and the student to keep records of ongoing progression in their classwork. So in the learning log, students can look back over the things that they themselves have found the most useful and also review over areas they still may struggle in. So as a teacher, I found it most successful when you let students be the driver within learning because it causes discussions to not be so shallow. Learning logs also have a way to let students reflect on activities and create questions about areas they may be confused on. You can also add a brainstorm what's next section in the learning log, so which lets students create their own thoughts and ideas about what might be discussed next in class.
I had reflection question two. How does this chapter align with or challenge your beliefs about teaching and learning? I said this chapter aligns with my belief that personal communication assessments are just as important as the other forms of assessment. Person to person assessment allows us to use conversations to assess important achievement targets like knowledge mastery, reasoning proficiency, and mastery of certain communication skills. I feel that if a student's able to tell you out their mouth what they learned, it's better than assessing on paper because when using paper or your traditional assessments, they could easily be using process of elimination or honestly just guessing for the best one. But allowing them to be able to have that conversation shows that they've actually mastered their knowledge and they have some sort of understanding of it.
I have reflection question number three, which is personal reflection on chapter 8. Chapter 8 reinforced the idea that assessment is not just about tests or written work, but also about meaningful interactions between teachers and students. I found it especially impactful that personal communication can provide deeper insight into student thinking than traditional assessments. This challenges the belief that assessment must always be formal or standardized. Instead, it highlights the power of conversations, questioning, and discussions and shaping instruction. Additionally, the emphasis on creating a safe learning environment stood out to me. Students are more likely to participate and demonstrate their understanding when they feel respected and supported. As an educator, this reminds me to be intentional not only in what I ask, but how I ask it, ensuring that my classroom promotes trust, engagement, and growth. Overall, this chapter aligns with my belief in student centered teaching, but it also challenged me to be more strategic and reflective in how I assess learning through everyday interactions. And just to bring up a point real quick, um, when I get evaluated, they do highlight, like, my students, like, trust me, they're engaged and stuff like that. And even with my discussions, like, although I want you to actually, like, sometimes I have you write it out, or sometimes I have you like type it up. But I found like this little, I guess you can call it like a little nugget where, like, if they're typing, instead of them having to type, they can use the voice command to fully, like, say out their thoughts. And then sometimes I have posted in there, like, like, be ready to share, or like comment, on each other's discussion posts in reference to whatever the prompt is. But no, chapter 8, this was good. This is really good.
Yeah, I think it was good too. I think that too, like you said, having like the safe learning environment and where they feel like good about like you and like know you and feel like you know them. I feel like it's really key and it's something that like I feel like people say like, yeah, you build relationships with students, but no one like really kind of tells you to. You kind of either like do or you don't. And like I feel like
Mm-hmm.
we all probably have teachers in our building who you can tell do really good at that and who like
Mm-hmm.
really struggle with that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're actually having kind of the opposite problem right now at our school where the kids are coming from other grades back to your room because they have flexible schedules when they're in 12th and 5th year, and then they're spending like time like in your planning or whatever, and like not like they're just not like being conscientious of teachers' time, and so we're having to be like,
Mm-hmm.
you actually have to like go to the study hall, like you can't come sit in our room, which is like feels so bad as a teacher to be like, you can't come, I can't do this right now with you. But like our administration is like telling us like we need to, and it's she's like, and our principal is like, I feel bad because y'all have done a good job building relationships with teachers, but now this is becoming a problem where they're like skipping their real
Yeah.
class to come see other teachers, and so. But I thought that was
Yeah.
interesting for sure.
Oh,
Okay,
I get it.
yeah. Well, and you want to like, or I do like I have my little Velcro children,
Yeah.
and and they just want to come see you and sit there, and I'm like,
Yeah.
fine. I'm like, if you're not supposed to be somewhere else, I'm like, where are you supposed to be? If you're supposed to be in
Right.
class, you need to go. But if you're sitting here eating lunch, you can eat for a minute. But it's it's like a two-way street with that.
Mm-hmm.
I had reflection question number 4, which is what part of this chapter makes you feel uncertain, nervous, or hesitant about applying in practice? Didn't really have too much because I feel like I actually use personal communication a lot for assessment as formative assessment, not really summative assessment. And so I think that's the part that probably makes me the most nervous is if I were to use it summatively, like making sure I have those like clear like purpose and target in mind because sometimes I feel like students and we our conversation just leads from one thing to the next and it's all good stuff, but I feel like sometimes I guess I'm not as clear because I'm not really looking for it for a grade. And so I think that's something that doesn't make me feel nervous but would make me like feel out of my comfort zone, I guess, is to try to put a grade on my personal communication. And so I think that's something I want to like maybe explore and potentially like try in future years teaching. Because I feel like at this point in the year, I feel like my like train is already rolling as far as what I have to do for the next 53 days. But um, it's something I would like to explore. But I liked this chapter a lot, and I feel like it was good to like kind of put a label on some things that we do in our classes. So, and like I feel like this whole time I've been like, I'm not really great at assessment. Like, that's something I want to work on. I'm like, well, actually, I do these things. I just didn't really know I was doing them for this type of assessment. So,
All right, and I will close this out. So, in chapter 8, we discussed personal communication as assessment. With personal communication assessment, we have 5 options: instructional question and answers, class discussions, conferences and interviews, oral examinations, and journal and logs. One thing to remember when using this method is that just because it's a more informal assessment method, we can't forget about these standards of assessment quality and always starting with a clear and appropriate vision, translating it into probes, sample performance appropriately, and attend to key sources of bias. We can generate quality information. And that concludes chapter 8, personal communication as assessment.